Now, for our lecture or commentary for today, the topic is applying the overall framework for solution architecture. So now you have a little bit of understanding, a little bit of material as far as theory goes. So the question that we have right now is how do we put it into practice? Okay, so this particular lecture will give you some principles, some insights, some best practices on how you can apply what you've learned as far as solution architecture concepts go. Okay, and this would refer to primarily customer engagements, really going to the customer. What are you going to do in order for you to be able to sell the idea and start your engagement with them? Okay, so these would be the things that we will talk about for this particular session. So now we apply the methodology into specific projects. Okay, we use architecture methodologies to do what? Basically, well, the most obvious ones would be to come up with solutions, right? Define custom solutions. So remember the principle behind our framework is that we try to solve problems. So we identify the problems, we come up with their solutions. And we like to use that phrase, everything you need and nothing you don't. So definitely having a solution architecture in mind, it enables us to come up with custom solutions. Now, not only custom solutions, it can help us define reusable solutions, especially if we understand that they're based on certain models and standards, which may not be exactly original or may not be unique or specific to the client at hand, then these solutions have the potential to be reusable. So we use architecture methodologies to be able to come up with solutions that can be reused, and not only reused in the sense that it's like an afterthought, right? Like you can actually scale it up. You can market your solution and even commoditize your solutions, right? So reusability to an extreme can mean commoditization of your solutions. Okay. And not only can you define either a custom solution or reusable solution, but you can even customize reusable solutions. So the first three bullet points talk about solutions. We use solution architecture to come up with solutions. Now, not only that, we come up with solution level intellectual property, and that's how we're able to leverage or maximize the benefits of solution architecture. Now, let's go into each one quite well. Okay, so this is an example of a reusable solutions lifecycle. Okay, at first you're probably going to come up with a custom solution, and then later on, if you are starting to get more exposure, more experience in doing solution architecture, you realize that a solution can be defined as something that can be reused. Perhaps the idea is the idea of modularity. I mean, you can come up with modular solutions because they're modular, their potential for reuse is high. And then later on, when you come up with reusable solutions, you can now customize those reusable solutions and then capture specific intellectual property around it. And like I said, you can even commoditize it. Okay, take reusability to an extreme so that you can actually package it as if it were a commodity, a simple product, like food or like personal care products like soaps and what have you. I mean, you can bring it down at that level. No? So these are the usual stages. They don't really have to follow that in that manner. Ideally, if you're building skill, if you're new to the craft of solution architecture, you'd probably want to do custom solutions first. But nothing is really preventing you from going straight away to a reusable solution if you do have an idea on how to come up with a solution that has a high potential for reuse. Now let's talk about defining the custom solution. So this is like the very first step in your reusable solutions lifecycle, which is pretty much the experience of everybody else, right? Maybe 80% of the solution architecture work that you'll be doing is a custom solution. Okay. And if you recall the analogy that we had regarding business and IT, where solution architecture is like the bridge, now we can actually see how that bridge can be decomposed. So in between, you have two deliverables. So you have a concept deliverable and a blueprint deliverable. Okay. And connecting these two islands with the two bigger uh, masses of land, okay, business and IT, you'd have three methodologies in mind. So you have your SAC methodology, or solution architecture concept methodology. You have your solution architecture blueprint methodology, and you have your delivery management. Delivery management, if you think about it, is really nothing more than project management. So for that should be covered under the topic of project management, and that's a pretty rich field already. So I'm not going to discuss much about delivery management. Okay. But we'll talk more about these two other methodologies, about the concepts, about the blueprint, okay, how they come up into the picture, how do we give it life, or how do we execute it in practice. Okay, so let's talk about the solution architecture concept first. So what is it? It's a workshop. If you think about it, it's a workshop. It's a consulting workshop that sets overall scope and direction to the architecture, aligning business needs with proposed IT investments, and secures buy-in of stakeholders. So the idea of an SAC is that you want to uh, achieve two things. You want to achieve alignment of business needs with IT, which is pretty much the purpose of architecture, right? The other purpose is to secure buy-in. You want to get the commitment of the people involved. Remember that for much of the earlier parts, when we were talking about the fundamental elements of architecture, we've given prominence to the role of the stakeholder, why the stakeholders are important. Okay. Now, the activity that would enable you to do these two things, alignment of business and IT and securing buy-in of stakeholders, is coming up with a consulting workshop. And the workshop, it's a workshop because it's going to be real work between you and the client. It's not going to be one way wherein you as the architect will just simply be sharing or presenting something. No, it's an honest to goodness workshop. You can probably call it as a focus group discussion, maybe, if you'd like to put it that way. You can say it's also a seminar, right? No problem. The reason why it's a workshop is because, one, the scope of or your target audience, so to speak, is just your client. Okay, whereas perhaps in a seminar you probably broaden it to a larger audience. But here, I mean, your audience is just simply your client, specifically maybe key stakeholders and decision makers. Okay, so it's a workshop. Okay, and the idea there is, what's the deliverable? At the end of the day, you want to be able to identify what's the scope and what's the direction for your eventual architecture. Now, the solution architecture blueprint is the architectural description of a project, initiative, or enterprise architecture with sufficient detail to guide investments and implementation. So in the end, everything that you guys have been doing as far as doing the views are concerned, coming up with the principles, okay, the models, the standards, or even prior to that, identifying the drivers, the goals, the metrics, okay, all of it would be documented in what is known as the blueprint. So everything that you'll do, okay, it will be in the blueprint. Now, what typically happens in a solution architecture concept, okay, this is an example. You can do this in 2 days, or you can probably do this in 4. Okay, but the idea here is that you want to do a rapid review of the key elements of a proposed solution. So it's rapid. Probably you'll just gloss over them, but the idea is you want to be able to structure your presentation into 4 views already. Okay. So you'll be talking about the business, the functional, the technical, the implementation views. Okay. And then prior to that, you'll probably spend time talking about business drivers and goals. Okay. And for each view, you'll be really unpacking all of the principles, the models, and the standards. Okay. Now, the purpose of the architecture concept is that you want to be able to define the conceptual architecture. Eventually, your solution architecture concept is supposed to lead you to come up with a more accurate blueprint. Okay. And of course, the concept is intended to facilitate well informed, rapid decisions and get shared stakeholder understanding and commitment to the proposed solution. So there you see those two things, right? You see alignment of business and IT, and you see getting the buy-in of the stakeholder. Without that, your chances of success in order for you to implement these things wouldn't be high. Okay, it would be admittedly a bit low if you think about it. Okay, now what about the solution architecture blueprint? Okay, um, well, this would be your documentation, so to speak, right? So you work with the customer to understand the business case. So now you're zeroing in on what problem or problems you want to solve, and then you establish an agreed to sufficient solution concept, and then you go through the nitty gritty. You define, design, and document all the essential features of the solution. You analyze the feasibility of the solution and plan the implementation of the solution. Okay, so typically, your blueprint would be composed of these specific items: your overview, your architectural requirements, okay, features and functions, the design, the acceptance criteria, feasibility assessment, and then your project plan or program plan, depending on the scope of your solution. Now, architecture is not a service we sell any more than PM is a service we sell. Okay? Um, it is a core competency we use to create solutions for our customers. Of course, we know that project management can be a service that we sell. So architecture can be a service that we can also sell, but more than a sellable or a commercial angle to architecture, and that's valid, right? You can have architecture to be something valid. It is nevertheless an important skill that we'd like all IT professionals to have. Okay, it is a competency we use to create solutions for our customers. So therefore, architecture is a pattern for replication with some controlled variation. Okay, and as such, it's perfectly suited for capturing large-scale intellectual property for customizable reuse. Architecture applies to more than just the infrastructure. I think that's something that we've been able to establish earlier. Okay. Now here's a real-world example. So in the case of Hewlett-Packard, okay, so after the merger of HP and Compaq, okay, Hewlett-Packard had 70 to 80 e-commerce storefronts worldwide, operating independently with little or no consistency. Right? And this causes the company to expend time and money inefficiently because there could be some need to coordinate across these storefronts. Nowadays, it's quite unthinkable that you still have a situation wherein you have 70 to 80 outlets or 70 to 80 locations that are not really coordinated, right? But back then, back in the early 2000s, it wasn't that intuitive, right? It wasn't really obvious. Now, each country, each region, each customer segment had different business rules and needs. Right? It makes sense. And there's nothing really wrong with that. Okay, there are location-specific demands, right? I mean, you cannot really say that everybody across the globe would have the same preference or the same profile, right? There will be some differences across locations. But the thing there is that there is that inefficiency somehow. So HP at that time would really want to consolidate from 70 to 80 into one to three storefronts, representing the three major regions of, of the company. So you have APJ, this refers to Asia Pacific and Japan, EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Africa, and the Americas, North and South America. So their target is that they want to create a global reference architecture for an integrated, simple commerce solution, forming the basis for global e-commerce, utilizing a collaborative development model. So what happened? Okay, so what's the problem statement here? Okay, so the problem statement here is that regional implementations with similar goals and drivers are implemented in significantly different manners, adding unnecessary maintenance and development costs. So I think that's clear. If you've had so many storefronts, so many outlets, so many locations, and the rules vary from one location to another. So it's very hard for you to really come up with something that's integrated or harmonious across all of these locations. And we know that efficiencies can be gained through along these things, okay? A global consistency, through compliance with the global reference architecture, component efficiency through common components, shared code, reuse, and regional autonomy through regional implementation and extensions to address local needs. Okay, so it's not going to be uniform across the board. There's going to be some level of flexibility depending on the area where you're in, but ideally you still want to have something that's consistent across the board. You want to have something that is common in nature, okay, and something that can be reused. So unnecessary inefficiencies due to the diversity of your implementation in each location is to be addressed by a global reference architecture. So what's the takeaway from this example? Well, our framework forms a firm foundation for strategy in creation of a reference architecture for business needs at a global enterprise initiative or project level. Okay. Our framework provides the tools to succeed. So everything that we add, right? So if you look at the 6 architectural elements, okay, we're okay with that. And then we start to apply the principles, the models and standards across 4 different views. Okay. They're pretty robust. They're pretty straightforward. Of course, there are going to be some work involved because it's very comprehensive. But nevertheless, it gives us some advantage. Our framework provides the tools to succeed, okay? So in this case, we see that it builds global and cross-functional consensus because you have a common global reference architecture. It ensures decisions are grounded in business drivers and goals because you've been able to articulate what the drivers and goals are, which are part of your 6 architectural elements, right? And so you have some basis. It's not guesswork, it's not inference, it's not gut feel. There's something objective there. Okay. It ensures the invariants are defined with flex points where needed. So it's not going to be pure uniformity, which tends to be rigid, but you know that there will be some opportunities for flexibility. Okay, we see that. And then establishes the governance models for growth and evolution. So now we go to the second subtopic here, which is now defining and customizing reusable solutions. So this would refer to the second and third portion in our reusable solutions lifecycle. So reuse is currently the magic bullet. Nowadays, you call it sustainability. So definitely, if you want your architecture to be sustainable, their degree of reuse, okay, or the possibility of reuse is something high. Okay, if it is something very specific, something very idiosyncratic, then it's not really sustainable, right? Think about it. You've spent a lot of effort doing for something that is one-off or one-shot. Naturally, it's not really going to be very efficient to some degree. You will be spending a lot, and the returns that you'll expect for that will just be one-off. Okay. So definitely the idea of reuse should always be in mind when we come up with an architecture framework. Okay. And the thing here is that reusing intellectual capital is the key to efficiency and effectiveness. Okay, we get it right once, we do it for everybody. Okay, use it over and over again and learn from and share the experience. Okay, and we avoid reinventing the square wheels. So the mistakes that we've learned in the past, by having that reuse or sustainability mindset, we are actually able to capture those mistakes, those errors, so that we avoid doing them in the future. Of course, it's not to say that we will completely remove the possibility of making the same mistakes later on. We could still come up with the same mistakes. We could probably come up with the same erroneous decision. I mean, there's nothing, well, there's nothing wrong in the sense that this is part of human nature, right? But you can see that if we keep on running to the same errors, the same mistakes, that creates inefficiencies, and that's costly. That's costly on our part. So definitely, always having the reuse mindset can be quite advantageous to any business, and architecture is supposed to help foster that type of mindset. So, what is a reusable solution? So, a reusable solution is a set of products and services integrated in conformance with the reusable solution architecture, whose details can be customized to meet the needs of a specific customer. Okay, just a reminder, we know that the solution is everything needed to completely solve a particular customer's business problem in context. Everything you need, and of course, nothing you don't. So, a solution should also not be superfluous, should not have excesses. Okay, and that's the idea of a solution. Everything you need, nothing you don't. So, what is a reusable solution architecture? Okay, a reusable solution architecture is a set of architecture collaterals based on standard architectural methodologies, such as the SAC, the Solution Architecture Concept, or the SAB, the Solution Architecture Blueprint, that are customized for a specific practice or domain. Now, even the idea, even the format of the solution architecture concept or the format for the solution architecture blueprint, they can actually be templated already, which allows you to reuse them. And naturally, your template can be more specific to the industry that you intend to use this, right? Naturally, from one industry to the other, there will be some wide variations. So in terms of reusability across the industries, well, you don't expect that much. Maybe except for the process of doing and solution architecture, that's going to be the same. But nevertheless, the output pertinent for each industry will only be applicable to that industry and no more, right? So there's going to be a need to customize it to a specific industry or domain. Now, reusable solution architectures capture the essential common content of customizable solutions. Now, what are the goals of reusable solution architecture? Well, reusable solution architectures enable us to achieve the following goals in markets where repeatable solutions are appropriate. Okay, it provides a faster time to market. Especially for working in the same industry, chances are the companies in the same industry may be faced with the same problem. So if you've been able to solve that problem in one company, you can actually solve that same problem in another company, provided they're in the same market or in the same industry. It's quite possible. Okay, reducing consultant preparation time and lower delivery cost. Okay. Ensure that key topics are addressed. So we now know the peculiarities of that industry. And we can actually improve the quality of consultative solution offerings. So, and the idea there is that because these reusable solution architectures have the potential to even be customizable, on top of the fact that it is reusable. So definitely your credibility as an architect or as a consultant is bolstered considerably if by doing the methodology very well. Now, what are reference architectures? So a reusable solution architecture is called a reference architecture. So think about it, right? It's like initially you were looking at the company and then you were doing custom solutions. So therefore, you've come up with a customized solution architecture. Eventually, you will sharpen your custom solution architecture and probably use it for a second company, a third company, a fourth company, and then you realize there are some commonalities here. Eventually, that custom solution architecture becomes a reusable solution architecture, which is nothing more than your reference architecture. Okay. Now, a reference architecture is one that is not intended for implementation as specified. Okay, so definitely your reference architecture should still have some sort of customization somehow. It should still be specific to a particular client, but your reference architecture is made in such a way because it is deliberately incomplete. Okay, what will complete it would be the specific nuances of the client. Okay, and it is deliberately too general, so you're not really going very deep into your reference architecture. Now, reusable solution architectures or reference architectures, well, they provide the context for complete, sufficiently detailed architectures that are intended for implementation. Eventually, your reference architecture will have to be tailored, will have to be customized so that you will have your own specific solution architecture for a client. But the idea there is that the solution architecture for this client, you're not starting from scratch. You're actually starting from a reference architecture and you're just filling in the blanks, right? Maybe trying to establish what might be the goals or the drivers of that client. Okay, so you just fill in the blanks. Okay, make some adjustments, tweak a little bit, and there you have it. You have your specific solution architecture for your client. Okay. So therefore, your reference architecture has the potential or must have the potential to be customizable. Otherwise, if it is already too specific or too customized, off the bat, one can say, your client can say that's not applicable to them because it's too specific. Maybe too specific to an earlier company or to an earlier client. Okay. Reference architectures specify the things that must be consistent across multiple instances or multiple architectures. Okay, so definitely your reference architectures should have some sort of an insight to a general domain or general practice, right? And therefore, this insight should be present across all customized instances of the architecture. Okay. And that should be what's common across all of the solutions that you have. So this is a stylized flowchart on how you can develop a new reusable solution architecture. So if we start at the top left, so we start with your frameworks and methodologies, and then we do generic architecture services. This would refer to your concept, your solution architecture concept, and your solution architecture blueprint. You start off with that. They can be generic. And then you have your first crack at your reusable solution architecture. And then from your reusable solution architecture, you come up with a reusable solution offering. Okay. Now, that reusable solution offering can be augmented by other frameworks and methodologies, not only limited with solution architecture. Okay. And your reusable solution offering can be augmented by other products and services. Okay. Your solution architecture should foresee the possibility that you can augment your offering. Okay. And then based on the customer-specific customization, you'd have your customer solution. So the green circle refers to what is reusable. You can see the domain-specific content, okay, your solution architecture, and your reusable solution offering. This would be reusable. However, once you instantiate that reusable solution offering by putting in something that's customer-specific, now that is your customized reusable solution. And later on, at the reusable solution architecture, you learn from your experience with this specific customer, then you augment it, you build it up, okay? And then you put it as part of your domain specific content eventually, or it becomes part of your enterprise reference architecture in the future. I mean, it builds on that. Now, what if an existing solution does not have a reference architecture? Well, it's possible. And normally this happens at the start, right? I mean, at the start, you come up with something customizable or customized. Okay, that it's not something that you were thinking of reusing anyway, right? Your objective is to come up with a solution for this client, and coming up with something reusable after that is secondary to what you intend to do. So that's fine. So what do? Well, you try to create a reference architecture eventually by looking at the common threads with multiple customer specific solutions. So by this time, if you've built experience doing architecture for more than one company, you will notice that, okay, especially if you're in the same industry, you will see common threads, you will see common topic areas, right? And then start identifying from this common material business goals, drivers, principles, rationals, obstacles, actions, standards, and models. Basically, the whole shebang, right? All the architectural elements. Okay, find out what's common across all of this, and then that's it. And then categorize the material into the 4 views and use the principles and rationals to link the views. So it's as if you are trying to create a solution architecture for a hypothetical average company for that industry or for that domain or for that practice. Okay. And once you have your average template, so to speak, no, then you can use the material to pre-populate your service artifacts for your concept and for your blueprints, right? So you don't really have to build from scratch, because if you're dealing with a customer in the same industry, then they might be faced with the same drivers. They might even have the same goals. Okay, they will probably measure the same metrics. So why go through the same thing again when you know that the results would probably be the same again? Okay. So, and normally this works if you're dealing with an architecture that is pertinent in the same industry. So making an existing solution reusable. So first, you notice that you can have multiple customer solutions. These are very specific to the customers, but then they might have something that's common. Now you try to extract what is customer specific and what is customer independent. Your customer independent is what you generalize, or what you try to find common ground for, okay? And this would be your customer independent elements. And then from your customer independent elements, you categorize them according to the 4 views. Okay. It's like you have 4 baskets. You were trying to chop down what is customer independent, and you just throw them into the baskets. And then after you've thrown all of the common elements into the 4 baskets, you try to link them. Try to make the connection. What's the connection between business, functional, technical, implementation? Right? And then at this stage, once you're able to link all these 4 views, this would already be your template, right? And then, okay, later on, when you have a new customer, maybe from the same market or from the same industry that comes in, it would be easy for you to reuse that. So you just come up with the things that you've placed on those 4 baskets, and then you do consider other things, right? Other things to consider. Then you come up with your solution offering artifacts. So that's something that's really specific to the customer. So, I mean, the business model, okay. In fact, this is how we look at it, right? Custom solutions, normally this is how we start. Custom solutions, these are sold to the early adopters. They just occupy 10% of your market. Okay. However, your customizable solutions, which are reusable solutions, reference architectures, this would constitute your mainstream 80% of your market. And later on, if you're able to commoditize your customizable solution, this would be your late adopters, which would only be 10%. So think about it. If you were to look at the financial or commercial viability of solution architecture, you'd always want to have something that is customizable. In other words, anything that is customizable should be something that has a high potential for reuse. Definitely, okay. Of course, that's like the goal, like the pipe dream of all solution architects, right? You want to be able to come up with your own reference architecture that is going to be the source of your competitive advantage. That's fine. That's to be expected. On the other hand, you cannot go at this stage if you haven't had the experience of actually doing architecture work, which means that you even have to go through the custom solutions at the start. Now, later on, if you're really successful with your customizable solutions, you might be even thinking, why don't I just commoditize the whole thing? Why don't I offer it as a standard service or a standard product? Okay. Okay. I mean, if there are still more people, okay, or more clients who can benefit from your solution as a commodity now, then go ahead. Okay? I mean, that's something that you can extend your and you'll probably get gravy out of it, as they say. No, it's no longer the cake itself, but really just the icing on the top of the cake. That's fine. But the message here is that if you really want to make a lot of money, so to speak, as an architect, then you have to be prepared to come up with reference architectures that have a high potential for reuse. Now, we go now to the last portion or the last item in the reusable solution lifecycle, which is capturing solution level intellectual property. Now, every solution creates new knowledge that should be made available for reuse by the architecture community. Eventually, you'll realize that there's this community of architects, community of solution architects, and this community is bent on making sure that this type of work is really considered as a profession, as a solid basis for being a profession, for being a professional. Okay, and having a reference architecture is an ideal way to share this knowledge. Okay, in fact, one advantage of making your custom architecture as a reference architecture is that it also protects the privacy of your clients. I mean, at least you know that there won't be any specific items there. And then eventually, okay, they're required for the solution, which becomes part of your solution delivery kit. Now, the thing there is that you have to keep on updating your solution architecture, your reference architecture for that matter. Okay, if it's not updated, not kept current, then it loses its reuse value, right? And this is part of the responsibility of the knowledge capture and reuse of all solution architects. Okay, so now this is the evolution of how you can come up with a solution reference architecture through successive customer engagements. So we've actually seen 1, 2, okay, and 3 and 4. Okay, we've seen that at the start, and of course 5 and 6 can be blown up towards the end of our cycle later on. So every time we have new customers, we try to find out what is generalizable and what is customer specific. And then what is generalizable, we use it to update our solution architecture. What is customer specific, we still put it in some database, right? We want to make sure that, okay, there's going to be a customer specific solution architecture. So number 9 is ideally what you give to your clients. You don't give your clients the reusable solution architecture. As we said, it's not specific enough. It's still broad. It's incomplete. It's not deep enough. Okay, but that's part of your arsenal, because eventually, if you will be dealing with potential clients in the future that may revolve, okay, in the same industry or may have the same problems, then yeah, at least you're not starting from scratch. Okay, and then you go back. So what's updated becomes now your current reusable solution architecture. So solution architects, as they grow older and older in the field, they actually build their portfolio of reusable solution architecture. Okay, so that's the whole idea there. Now, just as a reminder, how do we use architecture methodologies? So these are the 4 bullet points. Okay, the flow chart that you see below is your reusable solution lifecycle. Okay, so as long as you have these intents in mind, you should be fine. Okay. And we will actually stop here for now. For today, we will continue with the next topics on applying the solution architecture framework. This time we'll go into the dealing with the customers, now dealing with the engagements. We'll have a little bit more appreciation of how we deal with the customers in our next lecture. And with that, are there any questions on the reusability or reusable solution architecture? Do you guys have any thoughts or any comments or questions about the topics that were discussed?
None naman po, sir.
None. Okay, I'll stop recording for now.